Utini everybody, and welcome to another episode of this tutorial series on how to make a Jawa from scratch. We're starting this video with the already dyed monk's cloth. If you haven't watched the previous video on how to dye your monk's cloth, I'll leave the link for that video in the description below. For this tutorial, you're going to need a few things. You're going to need your monk's cloth, either dyed using the instructions in the previous video or with the potting soil brown that you can buy from the store. You're going to need the measurements of the person you're making the Jawa for. I got these at a previous time. You're going to need some chalk to mark out your pattern on the monk's cloth and a pair of sharp scissors. Now, I know that not everyone knows how to take measurements, so I'm going to show you a graphic that will help explain where you need to take your measurements. Feel free to pause and screen cap that image if you need to. It will help when taking your measurements if you weren't sure where we need to measure for this project. You're also going to need a measuring tape or a yardstick like I have here. You are going to want to use a measuring tape for taking the measurements of the people, but when we're cutting out the Jawa, I always find it easier to have a straight edge like this. See, I have laid out the majority of my fabric along the floor. You can use a table if you have a table that's big enough. I unfortunately do not, so I use my floor since it's the largest working surface that I have. What you're gonna do after you've laid it out on the floor is you're gonna slowly fold it in half to the length that you need it. Now that I've folded it in half, I've measured it out to be the length of the person that I am making this for, and I will cut the bottom across so that I'm working with a smaller piece of fabric and not everything that's left down there. Now that that's cut, I'm just going to fold the excess and set it aside for later. We'll be using this for sleeves and a hood later on. Now I'm going to fold this over again and then mark out where the middle is for the head hole. Now that it is folded in half again, I'm going to take my chalk and mark where the middle of the fabric is. Once you've marked out the middle, you'll want to open your fabric back up and then draw a semicircle for the neck hole. Don't worry if it looks small, you'll be adding a slit later that will allow you to get your head in and out. So the person I'm making this for has a shoulder length of 16 inches, which makes my job extremely easy. I'm just going to line up the yardstick mark at the 8-inch mark and then draw it out on either side and have her shoulder length. I would also like to note that I am going to be adding a 1.5 inch of a seam allowance on both sides of the shoulders. That way when I'm sewing on the sleeves, it's not going to take up some of the shoulder length. Alright, I've drawn out my 16 inches on either side, and then I've added a little bit of seam allowance for when I sew on the sleeves. Next, I'm going to draw out the sleeve area, and I'll put up a graphic on the pattern that I use and a link to where you can find it yourself in the description below. Once I've drawn it out to the person's measurements, I will then bell the costume all the way down from the underarm portion, getting myself a 1-inch seam allowance the entire way down. The next step will be to cut this out. Sorry guys, I had to switch filming locations, but essentially I cut out the entire side on each side of the Jawa robe. And what you're going to want to do is take these pieces and save them because we can use the scraps later for when we cover our boots. So you're going to want to put those aside, don't throw them away. They're going to be used for something later. So this is the rectangle piece of fabric that was left over from the bottom of the robe. All I've done is I've laid it flat on the floor and I folded over the edge. It used to be this long. I folded over the edge so that I can make my sleeve out of this piece. I've measured it, and if I cut this down the middle, I will have exactly, well, a little bit long because I want to leave some seam allowance. I'm going to have 2 sleeves out of this fabric. You can actually see right here where that fold was. That's where the middle of my sleeve is going to be. I'll cut that in half and I'll have 2 sleeves on either side. Now that the big long sleeve tube is cut, I'm going to fold this portion and set it aside for when we make the hood. Now it's time to cut this in half, and then we'll have our 2 sleeves. And there you have it, 1 Jawa robe and 2 sleeves all cut out, ready for you to assemble. Thank you everybody for watching this video. If you liked it, please make sure to leave a thumbs up and join me next time for my next video where I show you how to assemble your Jawa robe.